cybersecurity is expected to get weirder in 2020. That doesn't sound so good. Steve Ranger is here with us now to break this down. So, Steve, what do you mean when you say weirder in 2020?
So what's going to happen in 2020 is that cybersecurity is going to get weirder. It's going to get broader. It's going to get more challenging. If you think back in the old days, really the only thing that maybe the cybersecurity team had to worry about would be making sure that the PCs were secure and the antivirus is up to date, or maybe that the servers were protected. Well, now and increasingly next year, that whole threat landscape, the whole kind of like whole selection of things they've got to look after and worry about, that's just going to get broader and broader. I mean, this has been happening for a long time now, but when you start looking at some of the emerging threats, some of the threats that are ahead of us in the next year or so, it's really going to ask for a whole new set of skills from the IT team, from the security team in particular. If you think about things like the IoT and 5G coming up ahead of us, then those aren't the sorts of things that IT teams have necessarily been used to securing in the past. And they're going to have to get up to speed pretty fast, because obviously whenever there is a new technology, that means a new vulnerability, and that means that hackers and crooks will be looking to exploit it as quickly as they can.
Okay, and Steve, you touched on a little bit, but expand on ransomware and deepfakes. Of course, we're hearing so much about that right now and how it applies as we head into 2020.
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So I think this is one of those areas where security is going to have to get some new skills pretty fast, because if you look at something like phishing, well, we're all pretty experienced in phishing, unfortunately. Those emails that come in and maybe look like they're from your boss or one of your suppliers, asking for some money for an invoice or something, and of course they're completely fake and it's just a crook trying to get money out of you. Well, that's, quite a lot of us fall for those when they're just emails. Now, imagine if it was a phone call made with your boss's voice or with the voice from the people in accounts asking for that invoice or for that money. Even worse, imagine if it's a video call where you're on some sort of like video application and you think you're actually talking to someone who is actually inside your organization, and in fact it's a deep fake you're dealing with, completely computer-generated version of them which isn't them at all, but looks and sounds just like them. That's when this stuff gets really hard to deal with, and I think that it's really hard for us as organisations to work out how to deal with these things. But we have to do that now, because things like deepfakes are just around the corner. Now that is very different from making sure that the PCs are up to date with antivirus. It's about training staff. It's about looking at where the future risks are, and trying to work out not necessarily how to stop them, but how to mitigate them, how to put practices in place that stop them. That's just one example. You've got the Internet of Things, where things around your office or things inside your organization might be connected to the internet that were never connected to the internet before. How do you secure those things? How do you even know if they're connected to the internet? How do you know if that vending machine in the corner is actually an unsecured access to the internet that crooks can use to get into your networks? All these sorts of things. It's a much broader set of circumstances that organizations have to think about now, and it just goes on and on and on.
Okay, and Steve, does it seem like companies are starting to get this, to understand what they're really going to be dealing with as we head into 2020 and beyond?
Well, I think it's really hard to prepare for some of these future threats, and we could talk about how ransomware is going to evolve. I mean, already ransomware looks like it's evolving into something even nastier, where rather than just encrypting your data, it looks like crooks will then try and steal some of that data and kind of like ransom that back to you, or threaten to release it on the internet. So there's all sorts of future threats out there that I don't think we're all particularly prepared for. I think actually at the moment there is a very low or still too low awareness of how important tech security is, particularly at the kind of like the executive level. But also the reality is that while it's interesting to kind of do a bit of crystal ball gazing and look at these future threats, actually there are today's threats that we're still struggling to keep up with. So that's the kind of the classic email phishing, or making sure that people don't use their dog's name as their password, things like that. If we can get those basics fixed, then we've got a much better chance of dealing with this stuff coming down the line. But right now I think we need to focus on the stuff that we're still getting wrong, still getting those passwords wrong, still leaving software insecure, and not locking down cloud services we use, that kind of thing. Once organizations have that under control, and then you start looking at these future threats, because they're coming fast.